opulent Grand Hotel, perched on Devon's cliffs, a scream shatters the elegance. Victor Langley, a wealthy industrialist, lies dead, a letter opener in his heart. Hercule Poirot, the brilliant detective, steps into a web of secrets. A nervous heiress, a desperate gambler, a secretive doctor, and a young woman framed by her own initials. As hidden scandals, buried rings, and a vial of poison unravel, Poirot's little grey cells race to expose a cunning killer before they strike again. Will truth prevail in this deadly game of deception? The Grand Hotel hides its darkest mystery yet. Chapter 1. The Arrival at the Grand. The train from London to Torquay swayed gently, its rhythm a counterpoint to the restless thoughts of Hercule Poirot. He sat in the first-class carriage, his small, precise hands folded over the silver head of his cane, his green eyes half closed, yet missing nothing. The autumn landscape beyond the window, golden fields and hedgerows touched with crimson, held a deceptive calm. Poirot, however, was not one to be lulled by appearances. His invitation to the Grand Hotel, a bastion of luxury on the Devon coast, had come from his old friend Captain Arthur Hastings, who promised a splendid holiday. But Poirot's little grey cells whispered of something more, a shadow beneath the surface of this seaside idyll. As the train pulled into Torquay station, Poirot adjusted his impeccable Homburg hat and smoothed his moustache, a ritual as precise as a metronome. The platform bustled with porters' valises and the chatter of well-heeled travellers. Hastings stood waiting, his tweed suit slightly rumpled, his face alight with boyish enthusiasm tempered by a flicker of unease that Poirot noted at once. "Poirot, you old sleuth! Isn't this the life?" Hastings exclaimed, clapping his friend on the shoulder. "The Grand Hotel's the finest spot on the coast. Sea air, fine dining, and a bit of glamour. Just what you need to shake off London's fog." Poirot's lips curved in a faint, knowing smile. "Mon ami, the sea air is invigorating, oui, but Hercule Poirot does not choose his destinations for air alone. You have a certain agitation. What is it that troubles you?" Hastings laughed, a touch too heartily. "Nonsense, Poirot. Just eager to get you settled. The hotel's sent a motor car. Look, there it is." A sleek Rolls-Royce gleamed at the curb, its driver in crisp livery. The journey to the Grand Hotel wound through narrow lanes, past stone walls and windswept cliffs, until the hotel itself rose into view. A white palace perched above the churning sea. Its towers caught the late afternoon sun, and its gardens, ablaze with roses and dahlias, spoke of meticulous care. Yet Poirot's gaze lingered on the faces of the staff as they disembarked. A footman whose smile was too tight, a maid who glanced nervously toward the upper windows. The hotel's manager, Mr. Reginald Baxter, greeted them in the marble-floored foyer. His tailored suit and polished manner could not hide the strain in his eyes, nor the slight tremor in his hand as he extended it. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, a pleasure. The Grand Hotel is honoured to host such distinguished guests." "Merci, Monsieur Baxter," Poirot replied, his voice smooth as velvet. "Your establishment is magnifique. Yet I sense a certain disquiet. Is all well?" Baxter's smile faltered. "Oh, quite. Just the usual bustle of the season." He gestured toward the lounge, where guests in evening dress sipped cocktails. "Please, make yourselves at home." Poirot's eyes swept the room. A young woman caught his attention, slender, with auburn hair pinned elegantly, sitting alone by a window. Her hands twisted a lace handkerchief, and her gaze darted toward the foyer as if expecting someone. Poirot noted her pale complexion, the faint shadows beneath her eyes. "Who is that demoiselle?" he asked Hastings softly. "Miss Clara Henshaw," Hastings whispered. "Met her briefly when I arrived yesterday. Charming, but awfully jumpy. Her brother's here too, Edward Henshaw. Bit of a rogue, I hear." "Interessant," Poirot murmured, filing the names away. The air held a faint discord, like a note played out of tune. He resolved to observe Miss Henshaw closely. That evening, Poirot and Hastings dined in the hotel's grand dining room, its chandeliers casting a warm glow over tables set with silver and crystal. The menu boasted sole meunière and roast pheasant, but Poirot's attention was on the guests. A widowed heiress, Mrs. Evelyn Warrender, held court at a nearby table, her pearls gleaming, her laughter too loud. Her companion, Dr. Simon Fowler, a lean man with sharp features, watched the room with a clinician's detachment. Edward Henshaw, Clara's brother, sat apart, his handsome face clouded as he drained a glass of whisky. Poirot was savouring his dessert, a delicate tarte-tatin, when a piercing scream shattered the room's elegance. A maid, her apron askew, stumbled through the doors, her face ashen. "He's dead!" she gasped, clutching the arm of a waiter. "Mr. Langley, in room 312, dead." The dining room froze. Mrs. Warrender dropped her fork. Dr. Fowler rose, his expression unreadable. Clara Henshaw, entering at that moment, swayed as if she might faint. Poirot, his napkin folded neatly, stood with calm authority. "Hastings, vite! We must see this for ourselves." As they followed the trembling maid to the third floor, Poirot's mind was already at work. A holiday, perhaps, but the game had begun. The Grand Hotel, with its polished veneer, hid a darkness, and Hercule Poirot would uncover it. Chapter 2. The Scene of the Crime. The corridor of the Grand Hotel's third floor was a study in opulence, with its crimson carpet and gilt-framed mirrors, but the air was thick with the scent of tragedy. Hercule Poirot, his small, precise steps echoing softly, followed the trembling maid to room 312. Captain Hastings trailed behind, his face a mixture of curiosity and unease, while the hotel manager, Mr. Reginald Baxter, hovered at the rear, wringing his hands. The door to the room stood ajar, a sliver of lamplight spilling into the hall like an invitation to a grim tableau. Poirot paused at the threshold, his green eyes sweeping the scene with the precision of a watchmaker. The room was a monument to luxury. A four-poster bed draped in silk, a mahogany writing desk, and a crystal chandelier that gleamed like a frozen cascade. At the centre of this splendour lay Victor Langley, sprawled across a Persian rug, his lifeless eyes fixed on the ceiling. A letter opener, its silver handle engraved with the initials CH, protruded from his chest, a single crimson stain blooming on his white shirt front. The scene was oddly serene. No signs of a struggle, no overturned furniture, only the stark finality of death. "Mon Dieu!" Poirot murmured, adjusting his pince-nez glasses. "This is no act of impulse, Hastings. Observe the precision, the blade. It is placed just so, directly to the heart, a calculated act." Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, shuddered. "Ghastly business, Poirot. Poor chap didn't stand a chance. Robbery, do you think? His wallet's gone. Look, the pocket's turned out." Poirot's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Non, mon ami. A thief does not leave a letter opener with initials so conveniently displayed. This wallet, it is a distraction meant to mislead. We must look beyond the obvious." He knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers hovering over the wound without touching it. The letter opener was exquisite, its handle inlaid with mother-of-pearl, the blade sharp and clean save for the blood. Poirot's gaze darted to the room's details. The window, latched tightly against the sea breeze. The door, unmarred by signs of forced entry. A half-empty glass of brandy on the bedside table, its amber contents undisturbed. He rose, dusting his knees with a handkerchief, and turned to the maid who stood trembling in the doorway. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said gently, "you found Monsieur Langley. Tell me precisely what you saw." The maid, Elsie, twisted her apron in her hands. I came to turn down the bed, sir, around 9 o'clock. The door was unlocked, which was odd. I knocked, but no answer, so I went in. And there he was, just lying there with that thing in him. I didn't touch nothing, I swear, just screamed and ran for Mr. Baxter." Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. "And you saw no one else in the corridor? No sound, no movement?" Elsie shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "No, sir. It was quiet as a grave." Before Poirot could press further, the heavy tread of boots announced the arrival of Inspector Japp, summoned from London with surprising speed. His weathered face was grim, his moustache bristling with purpose. "Poirot! You again! Always turning up where there's trouble. What's the story here?" Poirot gestured to the body. "Monsieur Victor Langley, industrialist, found dead not an hour ago. A single wound, no struggle, and a letter opener bearing the initials C.H. "A most intriguing puzzle, Inspector." Japp snorted, crouching beside the body. "Looks plain enough to me. Someone had a grudge, stabbed him, nicked his wallet. Probably one of these posh types with a secret. What's this about initials?" Poirot pointed to the letter opener. "C.H. A clue, perhaps, or a misdirection. Tell me, Inspector, have you encountered a Clara Henshaw or another with those initials?" Japp frowned, scratching his chin. "Henshaw? Rings a bell. There's a young lady here by that name, isn't there, Baxter?" The manager, still pale, nodded. "Miss Clara Henshaw, yes. She's a guest, arrived 3 days ago with her brother Edward. But surely you don't think—" "I think nothing yet," Poirot interrupted smoothly. "I observe. The little grey cells, they require facts, not assumptions. Hastings, you mentioned Mademoiselle Henshaw earlier. What do you know of her?" Hastings flushed, ever susceptible to a pretty face. "Met her briefly yesterday. Lovely girl, but nervous as a cat. Seemed upset about something, wouldn't say what. Her brother's a bit of a bounder, though. Gambling type, I'd wager." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Interessant. And this letter opener, so personal an item, found in such a dramatic place. We must learn more of Monsieur Langley and those who knew him." He moved to the writing desk, where a leather-bound notebook lay open. The pages were filled with figures, sums, percentages, names of companies. Langley, it seemed, was a man of wealth and influence, his empire built on steel and shipping. A single sheet of paper, tucked beneath the blotter, caught Poirot's eye. It was a receipt from a London jeweller for a diamond ring, dated 2 weeks prior, addressed to Langley, but with no recipient named. Poirot slipped it into his pocket, his mind racing. "Inspector," he said, turning to Japp, "you will secure the room, we? No one must enter until we have examined every detail. And I would speak with the staff, discreetly. They see more than they say." Japp grunted. "You and your methods, Poirot. All right. I'll have my men comb the place, but mark my words, this'll be a simple case. Jealousy or money, that's what drives these things." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps, Inspector. But simplicity is often the mask of complexity. We shall see." As Japp barked orders to his constables, Poirot drew Hastings aside. "Mon ami, this hotel is a stage, and Langley's death is the opening act. We must uncover the players, their motives, their secrets. Clara Henshaw, her brother, perhaps others we have not yet met, and this ring." He tapped his pocket. "It may hold the key." Hastings nodded, though his eyes strayed to the doorway, where a small crowd of guests had gathered, whispering. Among them was Clara Henshaw, her face pale as moonlight, her hands clasped tightly. Poirot followed his friend's gaze, noting the young woman's fear, her quick glance toward the room, and the way her lips trembled as she turned away. "Come, Hastings," Poirot said, his voice low. "We return to the dining room. There, among the crystal and the candlelight, we will begin to unravel this web. But mark this, the murderer is here, among us, and they believe themselves clever. They do not know Hercule Poirot." As they descended the grand staircase, the hotel's elegance seemed to mock the violence it concealed. The sea roared faintly beyond the windows, a reminder of the world's indifference. Poirot's mind, however, was a whirl of order and method, piecing together the fragments of a crime that was anything but simple. Chapter 3. The Guests of the Grand. The library of the Grand Hotel was a haven of oak-panelled walls and leather-bound volumes, its air heavy with the scent of polished wood and old paper. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre of the room, his small, immaculate figure commanding attention despite his unassuming stature. The morning sun filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the gathered guests, each seated in a high-backed chair, arranged in a semicircle at Poirot's request. Captain Hastings stood by the fireplace, his arms crossed, his gaze flickering between curiosity and discomfort. The atmosphere was taut, as if the room itself held its breath. Poirot had requested the presence of those most closely linked to Victor Langley, and they now faced him, their expressions a gallery of unease, defiance, and carefully masked secrets. Miss Clara Henshaw sat nearest the window, her auburn hair catching the light, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her brother, Edward Henshaw, slouched beside her, his tailored suit slightly dishevelled, his eyes darting to the door as if longing for escape. Mrs. Evelyn Warrender, a widowed heiress swathed in black silk and pearls, occupied a central chair, her fan fluttering like a nervous bird. Beside her sat Dr. Simon Fowler, her companion, his lean frame rigid, his sharp eyes fixed on Poirot with a clinician's scrutiny. Mr. Reginald Baxter, the hotel manager, hovered at the edge of the group, his obsequious smile strained. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice soft yet carrying the weight of authority. "The death of Monsieur Victor Langley is no accident. It is murder, deliberate and precise. To solve it, Hercule Poirot must understand the man, and those who moved in his orbit. Each of you knew him, oui? I ask you to speak freely, for the truth, it hides in the smallest details." A murmur rippled through the group. Mrs. Warrender's fan snapped shut. "Really, Monsieur Poirot, this is most distressing. Victor was a dear friend, a gentleman, of impeccable character. To think one of us could be involved, it's unthinkable." Poirot's eyes twinkled, though his expression remained grave. "Madame, in matters of murder, nothing is unthinkable. Tell me, how well did you know Monsieur Langley?" Evelyn's lips parted, then closed, her composure faltering. "We met socially in London some years ago. He was charming, generous. We corresponded occasionally, nothing more." "Intéressant," Poirot said, his gaze lingering on her. "And you, Mademoiselle Henshaw, your acquaintance with the deceased, how did it come about?" Clara's fingers tightened on her skirt, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Langley was a business associate of my late father. We met him in Bristol last year, when he invested in one of father's ventures. He was kind at first, but distant." Edward Henshaw snorted, leaning forward. "Kind? Langley was a vulture, picking at anyone with a shilling to spare. He'd squeeze you dry and smile while doing it." Poirot turned to Edward, his moustache twitching slightly. "Strong words, Monsieur Henshaw. You did not care for him then. Perhaps a disagreement, a debt unpaid." Edward's face reddened, but he met Poirot's gaze defiantly. "I didn't like him, no, but I barely saw him here. Ask anyone. I was in the card-room most nights." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, then turned to Dr. Fowler, who had remained silent, his hands steepled before him. "And you, Doctor? What was your connection to Monsieur Langley?" Fowler's voice was cool, measured. "I knew him only in passing, through Mrs. Warrender's social circle. We exchanged pleasantries, nothing more. I'm here as her physician and friend, not Langley's." Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the faintest flicker in Fowler's demeanour, a tightening of the jaw, a shadow of caution. "Merci, Doctor. Your clarity is noted. And yet, a letter opener bearing the initials CH was found in Monsieur Langley's heart. Mademoiselle Henshaw, this item, it is yours, non?" Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. It was mine, yes, but I lost it days ago. I swear, Monsieur Poirot, I don't know how it got there. Someone must have taken it from my room. Edward shot to his feet. This is outrageous. You're accusing my sister based on a trinket? Langley had enemies by the dozen. Look at his business dealings, his rivals. Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. Calm yourself, Monsieur Henshaw. Accusations are premature. I seek only the truth. If the letter opener was stolen, we must ask why it was chosen, and by whom. Hastings, unable to resist, interjected, Poirot, surely Clara, Miss Henshaw, couldn't be involved. She's far too gentle for such a thing. Poirot's smile was indulgent but firm. Mon ami, the heart is a mystery, even in the gentlest souls. We must consider all possibilities. He paced slowly before the group. It just stood down his poke, hands clasped behind his back. Monsieur Langley was a man of wealth and influence. Yet wealth breeds envy, and influence enemies. Who among you had cause to wish him harm? A business rival? A scorned friend? Or perhaps something more personal? Mrs. Warrender's fan resumed its fluttering, her voice sharp. You speak as if we're all suspects, Monsieur Poirot. I assure you my grief is genuine. Victor was irreplaceable. Poirot inclined his head. Your grief is noted, madame. Yet grief, like love, can mask other motives. We shall see. He turned to Baxter, who had been hovering nervously. Monsieur Baxter, the staff, they see much, do they not? I would speak with them, particularly the maid Elsie and the porter Tom. They may hold pieces of this puzzle. Baxter nodded eagerly, relieved to be useful. Of course, Monsieur Poirot. I'll arrange it at once. As the guests dispersed, Poirot lingered by the window, watching Clara Henshaw hurry from the room, her brother close behind. Mrs. Warrender leaned heavily on Dr. Fowler's arm, her face pale beneath her rouge. Hastings joined Poirot, his brow furrowed. Poirot, you don't really suspect Clara, do you? She's terrified, poor thing. Poirot's eyes were distant, fixed on the sea beyond the gardens. Terror, Hastings, can be born of guilt or innocence. The letter opener, the locked room, the missing wallet, these are threads in a tapestry. We must trace each one carefully. He tapped his temple lightly. The little grey cells, they are at work. This hotel, it is a stage, and each guest plays a part. But who is the director of this drama? That, mon ami, is what we must discover. As they left the library, the Grand Hotel's grandeur seemed to close around them, its polished surfaces reflecting secrets yet to be uncovered. Poirot's mind was a whirl of questions. Why the letter opener? What did Langley know that made him a target? And who among these elegant strangers held the key to his death? The game, as Poirot knew, was only beginning. Chapter 4. The Shadow of the Past. The afternoon sun hung low over the Devon cliffs, bathing the Grand Hotel's gardens in a golden haze. But Hercule Poirot felt no warmth as he paced the gravel paths, his cane tapping a steady rhythm. The murder of Victor Langley was a puzzle with too many pieces missing, and Poirot's little grey cells demanded clarity. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, trailed behind, his face clouded with concern for Clara Henshaw, whose distress in the library had stirred his chivalrous heart. Poirot, you were rather hard on Miss Henshaw, Hastings ventured, kicking a stray pebble. That letter opener business, it's clearly a plant. Someone's trying to make her look guilty. Poirot paused by a rose bush, its petals wilting in the autumn chill. Mon ami, you see a damsel in distress, but Poirot sees a thread in the tapestry. The letter opener, yes, it may be a plant, but why her? Why not another? We must dig deeper into the past of Monsieur Langley and those who orbit him. Their morning in the library had revealed tensions, but no clear motive. Poirot resolved to question the hotel staff, those silent observers who moved like shadows through the lives of the wealthy. He began with Elsie, the maid who had discovered Langley's body. They met in a small parlour off the kitchens, its walls papered in faded green, the air sharp with the scent of polish. Elsie, a slight girl with mousy hair, stood twisting her hands, her eyes wide. "I don't know nothing, sir. Honest, I just found him like that, all dead and staring." Poirot's voice was gentle, coaxing. "Mademoiselle Elsie, you are in the rooms, the corridors. You hear things. Did Monsieur Langley have visitors? Arguments, perhaps?" Elsie hesitated, glancing at the door. "Well, sir, the night before, I heard him shouting in his room. Couldn't make out the words, but it was angry-like. I think it was Mr. Edward Henshaw with him. Something about money owed." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Money owed? Interessant. And did you see anyone else near room 3 to 12 that night?" Elsie shook her head. "No, sir, but Tom, the porter, he might have. He's always about, carrying bags and such." Next, Poirot found Tom, a wiry young man with a sharp nose, polishing brass in the foyer. Tom was less timid, his answers clipped but revealing. "Saw Dr. Fowler near the 3rd floor around 10, sir. Odd time for a doctor to be wandering, with his bag and all. Looked in a hurry, he did." Poirot filed this away, his mind turning to Dr. Fowler's guarded demeanour. "Merci, Tom. You have been most helpful." Returning to the hotel's lounge, Poirot noticed Clara Henshaw seated alone, her face pale as she stared at the sea beyond the windows. Hastings, ever drawn to her, approached, but Poirot held him back. "Not now, mon ami, let her be. Her thoughts are heavy, and we must learn why." Instead, Poirot retreated to Langley's room, now guarded by one of Inspector Japp's constables. With permission, he searched again, his gloved hands methodical. Beneath a loose floorboard under the writing desk, he found a hidden envelope, its wax seal broken. Inside was a letter, yellowed with age, addressed to Langley in a feminine hand. The signature read, "Evelyn Warrender," and the contents hinted at a long-ago scandal. "Victor, you know what my husband suffered because of your betrayal. I beg you, leave us in peace." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Aha! A thread from the past, Hastings. Madame Warrender has not been entirely candid." That evening, the dining room buzzed with subdued whispers, the guests uneasy under the weight of murder. Mrs. Warrender, resplendent in emerald velvet, laughed too brightly at a neighbour's jest, her eyes avoiding Poirot's. Dr. Fowler sat beside her, his expression as unreadable as ever, though Poirot noted the way his fingers drummed lightly on the tablecloth. Clara and Edward Henshaw dined at a corner table, their heads bent close, their conversation inaudible. As the dessert course, creme brulee with a perfect caramel crust, was served, Mrs. Warrender suddenly swayed in her chair, her hand clutching her throat. "Oh, heavens!" she gasped, collapsing in a theatrical swoon. Dr. Fowler was at her side in an instant, producing a vial of smelling salts from his pocket. The room stirred, guests murmuring, but Poirot watched closely. Fowler's movements were too precise, his calm too practiced, as he revived Mrs. Warrender with a few deft waves of the vial. "Most convenient, this fainting spell," Poirot murmured to Hastings. "It draws attention, no? But from what?" Hastings frowned. "You think she's play-acting? Or Fowler's up to something?" Poirot's eyes were sharp. "Both, perhaps. The doctor, he is a man who controls his emotions too well. And Madame Warrender, her grief is loud, but is it deep? We must learn more of this scandal she hinted at in her letter." As the evening drew to a close, Poirot lingered in the lounge, sipping a tisane and observing the guests. Clara Henshaw passed by, her steps hurried, her eyes red-rimmed. Edward followed, his face stormy, muttering something about debts and promises. Dr. Fowler escorted Mrs. Warrender to her suite, his hand steady on her arm. But Poirot caught a fleeting glance between them, a look not of affection, but of shared caution. "Hastings," Poirot said softly, This hotel is a house of mirrors, each guest reflecting a different truth. Langley's death is tied to secrets, old betrayals, unpaid debts, perhaps even love gone sour. Tomorrow, we must press harder. The truth, it is close, but it hides in the shadows of the past. Hastings nodded, though his thoughts lingered on Clara. I just hope we can clear her name, Poirot. She doesn't deserve this suspicion. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Deserve, mon ami, is not the question. The question is truth, and Hercule Poirot will find it, no matter how deeply it is buried. As they retired to their rooms, the Grand Hotel seemed to settle into an uneasy silence, its grandeur a fragile mask over the currents of deceit swirling within. Poirot lay awake, his mind tracing the connections, Evelyn's letter, Edward's debts, Fowler's late-night wanderings. The puzzle was taking shape, but one piece remained elusive, and Poirot knew it would not reveal itself easily. Chapter 5. The Midnight Discovery. The Grand Hotel was cloaked in the stillness of midnight, its corridors dim, the only sounds the distant crash of waves against the Devon cliffs and the faint creak of the building settling. Hercule Poirot, unable to sleep, stood by his window, the moonlight casting his small, precise silhouette across the room. His mind churned with the day's findings. The letter from Evelyn Warrender, hinting at a past betrayal. Edward Henshaw's heated argument with Victor Langley over debts. Dr. Fowler's late-night presence near room 312. Each thread tantalized, yet the pattern of the crime remained elusive. Restless, Poirot donned his dressing gown, slipped his feet into polished slippers, and ventured into the silent hotel, his cane a soft tap against the carpet. He moved with purpose, his green eyes sharp in the gloom, drawn to the garden terrace below, where a flicker of movement had caught his attention from his window. The terrace, bordered by rosebeds and illuminated by a single lantern, was deserted, or so it seemed. As Poirot descended the grand staircase, he heard a faint clink, like metal on stone, coming from the gardens. He stepped onto the terrace, his breath misting in the cool night air, and concealed himself behind a marble urn, watching. A figure emerged from the shadows. Clara Henshaw, her auburn hair loose, her face pale as moonlight. She knelt by a rosebed, her hands working quickly, digging with a small trowel. Poirot's eyes narrowed as she buried something, smoothing the earth with care before glancing around, her movements furtive. She rose and hurried back into the hotel, unaware of the detective's presence. Poirot waited until her footsteps faded, then approached the rosebed. With gloved hands, he carefully unearthed a small velvet pouch, its fabric damp with soil. Inside was a diamond ring, its stone catching the lantern's glow like a trapped star. The band bore an inscription, "To C, forever VL." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "a token of affection, or a noose tightening around Mademoiselle Henshaw." He pocketed the pouch and returned to his room, his mind racing. The ring suggested a deeper connection between Clara and Langley, yet her act of burying it spoke of fear, not guilt. Was she hiding evidence of her own involvement or protecting someone else? The initials CH on the letter opener, now this ring, too many clues pointed to Clara. Yet Poirot sensed a clever hand orchestrating suspicion. The next morning, over a breakfast of croissants and café au lait, Poirot sat with Hastings in the hotel's conservatory, the glass walls framing a view of the sea. Hastings, ever the romantic, was indignant. "Poirot, I saw Clara last night, leaving the terrace. She looked terrified, not guilty. Surely she's being framed." Poirot sipped his coffee, his expression unreadable. "Mon ami, fear and guilt are not mutually exclusive. But I agree. The evidence against Mademoiselle Henshaw is too convenient. The letter opener, now this ring, it is as if someone wishes us to believe her guilty. We must speak with her, alone." After breakfast, Poirot arranged a private meeting with Clara in a quiet sitting room, its walls adorned with pastoral watercolors. Clara entered, her eyes red-rimmed, her hands clasped tightly. Poirot gestured to a chair. his voice gentle but firm. "Mademoiselle, last night I observed you in the gardens. You buried this." He produced the velvet pouch, opening it to reveal the ring. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "How?" "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, I didn't kill him. I swear it." "Then explain, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his green eyes piercing. "This ring, inscribed to you from Victor Langley, it suggests a bond. Yet you buried it in secret. Why?" Clara's shoulders sagged, tears spilling down her cheeks. "He proposed to me last month in Bristol. I refused him. Victor was not what he seemed. He was kind at first, but cruel, manipulative. He wouldn't accept my refusal, kept sending gifts, letters. That ring arrived a week ago, with a note demanding I meet him here. I was afraid. He knew things about my father's business, things that could ruin us. When I heard he was dead, I panicked. I thought if anyone found the ring, they'd think I killed him." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but insistent. "And the letter opener, mademoiselle? It bears your initials." "I told you I lost it," Clara cried. "It was on my dressing table 3 days ago, then gone. Someone must have taken it to make it look like I did it." Poirot studied her, his mind weighing her words. Her fear seemed genuine, her story plausible, yet incomplete. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have given me much to consider. For now, say nothing of this ring to anyone, not even your brother." Clara nodded, wiping her eyes, and left the room. Hastings, who had been listening from the doorway, burst in. "Poirot! You believe her, don't you? She's no murderer." Poirot raised a hand. "Calm yourself, Hastings. I believe she speaks part of the truth, but the heart is a labyrinth. We must look elsewhere, to those who might profit from her implication." He turned his thoughts to the other guests. Evelyn Warrender's letter, hinting at a scandal, suggested a motive rooted in vengeance. Edward Henshaw's debts pointed to desperation. Dr. Fowler's late-night presence near room 312 raised questions about his role. And then there was the missing wallet, a detail too obvious, too theatrical. Poirot spent the afternoon in quiet observation, lingering in the hotel's lounge, where guests moved like actors on a stage. He noted Edward Henshaw's tense conversation with a waiter, his voice low but urgent, mentioning a payment due. Mrs. Warrender, recovered from her fainting spell, held court with forced gaiety, her eyes darting to Dr. Fowler, who remained at her side, his demeanour coolly attentive. Poirot's grey cells hummed. Was Fowler protecting Evelyn, or using her as a shield? As evening fell, Poirot returned to the terrace, standing by the rosebed where Clara had buried the ring. The sea roared below, its rhythm a counterpoint to his thoughts. "The murderer is clever," he murmured to himself, "but they have underestimated Hercule Poirot. The ring, the letter, opener, these are not mistakes, but arrows pointing to the truth." He resolved to confront Dr. Fowler next, sensing the doctor's calm exterior hid a deeper current. The puzzle was tightening, each clue a step closer to the heart of the crime. As Poirot re-entered the hotel, the grand chandelier above cast 1,000 prisms of light, illuminating a path that led not to clarity, but to deeper shadows. Chapter 6. The Doctor's Secret. The Grand Hotel's morning room was bathed in the soft light of a cloudy dawn, its windows framing a restless sea that churned beneath a sky heavy with the promise of rain. Hercule Poirot sat at a small table, his breakfast of poached eggs and toast untouched, his green eyes fixed on a single point in the distance, as his mind wove together the threads of Victor Langley's murder. Captain Hastings, seated opposite, buttered his toast with unnecessary vigour, his thoughts still entangled with Clara Henshaw's tearful confession about the buried ring. "Poirot," Hastings said, breaking the silence, "you're awfully quiet. That ring, it proves Clara's innocent, doesn't it? Someone's setting her up, and I'd wager it's that brother of hers, Edward. He's got the look of a man with debts and no scruples." Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile, his fingers adjusting the precise alignment of his coffee cup. Mon ami, you leap to conclusions like a grasshopper. The ring, oui, it suggests Mademoiselle Henshaw is a target of suspicion, but it does not absolve her. Nor does it condemn Monsieur Edward. We must consider all players in this drama, and one in particular intrigues me, Dr. Simon Fowler. Hastings frowned, crumbs clinging to his moustache. Fowler? He's just Mrs. Warrender's shadow, always hovering with his medical bag. Seems a bit cold, but harmless. Harmless? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Non, Hastings. A man who moves with such control, who speaks so little, yet observes so much. He is never harmless. I have made inquiries, and the good doctor has a past that casts a long shadow. Poirot had, through a discreet telegram to a contact in London, uncovered a troubling history. Dr. Fowler, it seemed, had been struck off the medical register 5 years prior for conducting unauthorized experiments on patients, funded by none other than Victor Langley. Though reinstated recently, the scandal clung to him like damp mist. Poirot's grey cells hummed with the implications. A man with such a history might have reason to fear, or resent, his former patron. Determined to probe deeper, Poirot arranged to meet Fowler in the hotel's conservatory, a glass-walled haven filled with ferns and the faint scent of earth. Fowler arrived promptly, his lean frame clad in a sombre grey suit, his medical bag at his side. His sharp eyes met Poirot's with a cool wariness, like a fencer awaiting the first lunge. Monsieur Poirot, Fowler said, his voice clipped, I understand you have questions about Mr. Langley's death. I'm happy to assist, though I fear I know little of value. Poirot's smile was disarming, his tone velvet smooth. Doctor, your modesty is noted, but Hercule Poirot seeks the truth in all its corners. You knew Monsieur Langley, oui? Not merely through Madame Warrender, I think. Fowler's jaw tightened, a fleeting crack in his composure. I met him years ago, yes. He was a financial supporter of my early research. Our acquaintance was professional, nothing more. Interessant, Poirot said, leaning forward. And this research, it was, perhaps, controversial. Enough to cost you your license for a time? Fowler's fingers twitched on the handle of his bag, but his voice remained steady. You've done your homework, Monsieur Poirot. Yes, there was a misunderstanding with the medical board, but it's long resolved. Langley had no part in that trouble, and I had no reason to wish him harm. Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the faintest tremor in Fowler's tone. And yet, Doctor, you were seen near room 312 the night of the murder, carrying this bag. What was your purpose? Fowler's gaze hardened. I was checking on a guest with a headache. Mrs. Warrender, as it happens. My bag contains only medical supplies. You're welcome to inspect it. Perhaps I shall, Poirot said lightly, though he made no move to do so. Instead, he changed tack. Tell me, Doctor, what do you know of potassium cyanide? A poison, I believe, that can kill swiftly, leaving little trace unless one looks closely. Fowler's face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened on the bag's handle. Cyanide is a known poison, yes. I carry none, if that's what you're implying. My work is to heal, not harm. Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, but his mind was alight. Later, with Inspector Japp's permission, he examined Fowler's medical bag in the presence of a constable. Among the vials of laudanum and smelling salts was a small, unmarked bottle containing a crystalline substance. Poirot's gloved fingers lifted it carefully, his nose detecting a faint almond-like odour. Mon Dieu, he murmured, cyanide, as I suspected. But why the letter opener, if poison was the weapon? Hastings, who had joined him, was aghast. Poison? Then the letter opener was a ruse? Good Lord, Poirot, that's devilishly clever. Oui, Hastings, Poirot said, his voice low. A double deception, to kill with poison, then stage a stabbing to mislead. But why implicate Mademoiselle Henshaw? To protect the true motive, perhaps? That afternoon, Poirot observed Fowler in the lounge, noting the doctor's attentive care of Mrs. Warrender, whose theatrical grief seemed to intensify under scrutiny. Edward Henshaw, meanwhile, was absent, reportedly at a local pub, drowning his troubles. Clara remained in her room, avoiding the other guests. Poirot's thoughts turned to the ring, the letter, the debts, each a clue, yet none complete without the others. He confided in Hastings as they strolled the hotel's cliffside path in the wind tugging at their coats. "The doctor, he is a man of secrets, but is he the murderer? Or is he too a pawn in a larger game? The cyanide suggests a clinical mind, but the letter opener, it is theatrical, emotional. We must find the link." Hastings shook his head. "I still say Clara's innocent. Fowler's your man, Poirot. He's got the means and a shady past." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps, mon ami. But the heart of this crime lies in what Langley knew, and who feared his knowledge. Tomorrow we gather all of the players. The truth, it will not hide much longer." As they returned to the hotel, the clouds broke, and rain began to fall, cloaking the ground in a veil of mist. Poirot felt the puzzle tightening, the pieces aligning, but one question lingered. Who had woven this web of deception, and why? Chapter 7. The Unravelling. The ballroom of the Grand Hotel gleamed with an almost defiant elegance, its polished parquet floor reflecting the soft glow of chandeliers, its tall windows framing a turbulent sea under a sky bruised with storm clouds. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, immaculate figure a focal point of quiet authority. The guests, summoned at his request, sat in a semicircle of gilt chairs, their faces a gallery of apprehension, defiance, and barely concealed dread. Captain Hastings stood by the door, his arms crossed, his eyes darting between Clara Henshaw's pale countenance and Dr. Simon Fowler's impassive stare. Inspector Japp, flanked by 2 constables, leaned against a wall, his moustache twitching with impatience. The air was heavy with the weight of impending revelation. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and deliberate, "the murder of Victor Langley is a crime of precision, woven with threads of deception. Each of you has played a part in this drama, knowingly or not. But Hercule Poirot, with the aid of his little grey cells, has unravelled the tapestry. The truth, it is now before us." A murmur rippled through the group. Mrs. Evelyn Warrender clutched her fan, her pearls gleaming against her black silk gown. Clara Henshaw sat rigid, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Edward Henshaw, his face flushed from a morning at the local pub, shifted uneasily. Dr. Fowler, his sharp eyes fixed on Poirot, betrayed no emotion, though his fingers rested lightly on his medical bag. Mr. Reginald Baxter, the hotel manager, hovered at the edge, his nervous smile long vanished. Poirot paced slowly, his cane tapping a measured rhythm. "Let us begin with the scene. Monsieur Langley, found dead in room 312, a letter opener bearing the initials CH in his heart. A missing wallet suggested robbery, but the room was undisturbed, the window locked, the door unforced. This was no crime of passion, but a calculated act. The question is, who had motive, means, and opportunity?" He turned to Edward Henshaw, whose jaw tightened. "Monsieur Henshaw, you owed Langley a substantial sum. Gambling debts, we? The maid Elsie overheard you arguing with him the night before his death about money owed. You had reason to fear him, did you not?" Edward shot to his feet, his voice rough. "I owed him, yes, but I didn't kill him. I was in the card room until midnight. Ask the staff." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "We shall verify, monsieur, but debts can drive men to desperation, and desperation to dark deeds." He faced Mrs. Warrender, whose fan snapped open, fluttering like a trapped bird. "Madame, your connection to Langley was more than social. A letter hidden in his room revealed a scandal involving your late husband. Langley's actions caused you pain, perhaps ruin. Did you seek revenge? Evelyn's eyes widened, her voice sharp. How dare you, Monsieur Poirot? That was years ago. I mourned Victor, not hated him. Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone mild but piercing. Yet grief can be a mask for deeper motives. Your fainting spell, so dramatic, was it to divert attention? Before she could respond, Poirot turned to Clara Henshaw, whose gaze dropped to the floor. Mademoiselle, the letter opener was yours, lost days before the crime. A diamond ring, inscribed from Langley to you, was buried in the gardens. You admitted he proposed, and you refused. Did he threaten you, or your family's reputation? Clara's voice trembled, but she met his eyes. I told you, I didn't kill him. I buried the ring because I was afraid I'd be blamed. Poirot's moustache twitched. And so you were, mademoiselle. The evidence points to you too neatly. But Poirot suspects a clever hand at work, guiding our eyes. He paused before Dr. Fowler, whose calm demeanor seemed to challenge Poirot's scrutiny. Doctor, you are the enigma. You knew Langley from your disgraced past, when he funded your unethical experiments. A vial of potassium cyanide was found in your bag, a poison that could kill swiftly, leaving no trace but for a faint almond scent. And you were seen near room 312 that night, carrying that bag. Fowler's eyes narrowed, but his voice remained steady. I've told you, I was tending to Mrs. Warrender. The cyanide is for medical purposes, diluted and safe. You have no proof, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot's smile was razor-sharp. Proof, doctor, lies in the details. The letter opener, so dramatic, was a distraction. Langley was poisoned. Cyanide, administered in his brandy, I suspect. The letter opener was added later, to cast suspicion on Mademoiselle Henshaw. But the porter, Tom, saw you near room 312 at 10, not visiting Mrs. Warrender, who was in the lounge. And the vial in your bag, it bears traces of undiluted cyanide, enough to kill. A gasp rose from the group. Fowler's composure cracked, his hand tightening on his bag. This is preposterous. You're weaving a fantasy. No, Poirot said, his voice rising. The fantasy is yours, Doctor. Langley held power over you, threats to expose your past, to ruin your reinstatement. You poisoned him, quick and silent, then staged the scene with Clara's letter opener, stolen from her room. The ring you took from Langley's belongings and planted in the garden, knowing she would panic and bury it, sealing her guilt. Fowler stood, his face pale. You can't prove any of this. Poirot gestured to Japp, who stepped forward, holding a small glass vial. The laboratory in London confirms it, Doctor. The brandy glass from Langley's room, traces of cyanide. Your fingerprints on the letter opener, not Clara's. And Tom's testimony places you at the scene. Fowler's shoulders sagged, his voice a low hiss. Langley was a parasite. He'd have destroyed me. After all I'd rebuilt, I had no choice. Japp signaled his constables, who moved to restrain Fowler. That's enough, Doctor. You're coming with us. As Fowler was led away, Clara sobbed, relief breaking through her fear. Edward, chastened, put an arm around her. Mrs. Warrender, her face ashen, rose and left without a word, her secrets intact for now. Poirot watched them go, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. Hastings, he said softly, the truth, it is a light that pierces the darkness, but it leaves shadows behind. The ballroom emptied, the chandeliers casting their glow on an empty stage. The puzzle was solved, but Poirot knew the human heart would always weave new mysteries. Chapter 8. The Final Thread. The Grand Hotel stood serene against the Devon cliffs, its white facade gleaming under a sky newly cleared of storm clouds, as if the resolution of Victor Langley's murder had lifted a pall from the air. Hercule Poirot stood in the hotel's foyer, his small, precise figure immaculate in a tailored suit, his cane resting lightly in his gloved hand. Captain Hastings beside him adjusted his hat, his face a mixture of relief and lingering unease, as their luggage was loaded into the waiting Rolls-Royce. The case was closed, yet the echoes of deceit and desperation lingered, like the faint scent of roses from the gardens. Dr. Simon Fowler's confession had unravelled the final threads of the mystery. In the ballroom, under Poirot's relentless scrutiny, he had admitted to poisoning Langley with cyanide, slipped into the industrialist's brandy during a late-night visit to room 3-12. The letter opener, stolen from Clara Henshaw's room, was a deliberate misdirection, as was the diamond ring, taken from Langley's belongings and planted in the garden to deepen suspicion against Clara. Fowler's motive was clear. Langley's threats to expose his disgraced past had endangered his fragile reinstatement as a physician. The murder was a cold act of self-preservation, masked by theatrical flourishes to mislead. As Poirot and Hastings prepared to depart, Clara Henshaw approached, her auburn hair neatly pinned, her eyes still shadowed but bright with gratitude. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice soft, "I cannot thank you enough. I thought I'd be ruined, or worse. You've given me my life back." Poirot inclined his head, his green eyes kind but sharp. "Mademoiselle, the truth is a debt we owe to justice, but take care. Your heart, it is too open, guard it well." Hastings, ever gallant, took her hand, his face flushed. "Miss Henshaw, if you're ever in London, do look us up. We'd be delighted to see you." Clara smiled, a fragile warmth breaking through her reserve, and withdrew to join her brother Edward, who stood at a distance, his usual bravado subdued. Edward had been cleared of murder, but his gambling debts and reckless temper had been laid bare. He nodded curtly to Poirot, muttering, "I'll settle my accounts one way or another." Poirot noted the resolve in his voice, hoping it signalled reform rather than further folly. Mrs. Evelyn Warrender, her pearls gleaming against a sombre grey gown, emerged from the lounge to bid them farewell. Her theatrical grief had vanished, replaced by a brittle dignity. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her fan still but her eyes guarded, "you've stirred quite the hornet's nest. I suppose I should be grateful my own secrets remain private." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Madam, the past is a shadow, but it is not my task to cast light where it is not needed. Be at peace." She inclined her head and retreated, her connection to Langley's scandal left unexplored. A silent agreement between her and Poirot. The hotel manager, Mr. Reginald Baxter, hovered nearby, his nervous energy calmed by the restoration of order. "Monsieur Poirot, the Grand is in your debt. This could have ruined us." "No, Monsieur Baxter," Poirot replied. "It is order and method that save us all. Keep your staff vigilant. They see more than you know." Inspector Japp, who had overseen Fowler's transfer to London for trial, joined them in the foyer, his weathered face creased with a rare grin. "Poirot, you've done it again. Mind like a steel trap, eh? Though I'll wager you enjoyed the drama of that ballroom scene." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Mon cher Japp, the drama is merely the frame for the truth. But I confess, the little grey cells, they thrive on such challenges." As the Rolls-Royce carried them toward Torquay Station, the Grand Hotel receded into the mist, its towers like sentinels guarding secrets now laid bare. Hastings gazed out the window, his thoughts drifting. "Poirot, do you ever tire of it? Peeling back the lies, seeing the worst in people?" Poirot adjusted his Homburg hat, his voice soft but firm. "Mon ami, the human heart is a labyrinth, full of darkness, but also of hope. To find the truth is to bring light, even if it stings. Hercule Poirot does not tire of this task. It is his purpose." Hastings grinned, shaking his head. "Another triumph for the grey cells, then. Where to next, old chap? London, or another mystery?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Wherever there is disorder, Hastings, there Poirot will be, bringing order and method. But for now, a tisane and a quiet evening, no? The train's whistle sounded as they reached the station, a sharp note cutting through the sea air. The Grand Hotel, with its elegance and its shadows, faded into memory, but Poirot knew other puzzles awaited, each a new tapestry to unravel. As the train pulled away, he closed his eyes, his mind already turning to the next challenge, the next truth hidden in the folds of human nature.